Hello, and welcome to the 13th episode of Harmonious World. I'm Hilary Robertson, and in this episode, I interview the incredibly talented Maria Schneider. Not only is she a very talented musician, composer, and arranger, but she's also been increasingly outspoken about Google and big data companies, writing articles and white papers, appearing on Copyright Office roundtables, and testifying before Congress in the United States.
Hello.
Hi!
How are you?
I'm great, thank you. How are you?
Very good.
Yeah. Are you at home as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have a place in the country. Normally I'm in New York City. And now we're just thanking our lucky stars that we bought this little place maybe 9 years ago, because now it's just a refuge for us.
Very good. Oh, this is such an honor. I can't tell you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
I missed you. You came to Ronnie's, didn't you, in about this time last year? Was it?
Yes.
And
Yeah, it was early July. As a matter of fact, I just wrote an email to somebody in the band. That was so much fun. The most fun band, hysterically funny. Oh my God. I just I had such a great time with them. How is
yeah,
Ronnie Scott's doing? I'm so worried about them with the pandemic.
yeah. They are. I mean, they've been doing lots of online streaming and things.
Uh-huh.
So I think they're retaining their customer base, if you like, their audience, which
Okay.
I think is probably what most of the big venues are doing.
Okay.
But the trouble, of course, is that whereas some of the smaller venues around London, we've got some amazing jazz venues around, especially around London. I'm about 30 miles outside London, but all around there are some really great venues, and a lot of them have got outside spaces that are kind of near them or attached to them, so they've been able to adapt a little bit, or they're
Okay. Oh, that's good.
yeah, or they're certainly making plans to do that.
Can they have some music outside in London or not really?
We're just starting now,
Okay.
where obviously we've all got to be socially distanced and all the rest of it, but yes, so it is kind of starting, and I know that some of the smaller venues are making plans for, they're not exactly festivals, but that sort of thing. But of course, because Ronnie's is right in the centre of London, they just don't have that.
Okay.
So
Yeah, if Ronnie's is in such a great area, that whole area must be really suffering.
yeah, it really has. I don't know if when you were there, or because you've been more than once, haven't you?
No,
Obviously.
no, that was my
Oh,
first time.
really?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
wow. Well, did
that
you
was
manage to get across the road to Bar Italia?
no.
Oh, okay. When you next time you go, or next time you're in London, right across the road from the entrance to Ronnie Scott's is Bar Italia, and it's
Okay.
one of the oldest established coffee houses
Oh, okay.
run by Italians. It's the most amazing place. You have to go there.
Yeah, I ate a
So
lot of
yeah,
places around there. That the band took me to various places, and
I bet
uh,
they did.
it was really fun. I
Yeah,
had such a great
yeah.
time.
Okay, good. Well, let's talk about Data Lords.
Okay.
This is a really stunning collection, isn't it?
Well, thank you. I
Yeah.
think so.
Yeah. I mean, I love the concept behind it. I love the concept. I didn't quite get it at first. When I was sent the link, I was a bit like, "Whoa, okay, what's going on here?" And then when you listen to it, when you get into it, you can see the difference between the two CDs.
Uh-huh.
And I understand absolutely where you're coming from. I don't you feel that you're in a cleft stick as a musician in the 21st century, where all of the bad stuff about the data lords is actually the same stuff that allows you to engage with your audience and all the rest of it?
Well, I think the internet definitely allows me to engage with my audience, but the part that's destructive is the part where big companies have found ways to make everything work for themselves, and to basically use people, use, for instance, in the case of YouTube, using music for the purpose of gathering data. That's what it is. I'm sure that's why Google bought them, because it was such a magnet for eyeballs, and with all those eyeballs comes all the data gathering. So it's the usury of musicians, it's the usury of the general public, the idea of making people addicted to their platforms, children, so that they stay on, and then they target them with ads, and and these companies purposely, Facebook and everybody, they've admitted that they study what creates the dopamine hit that puts that chemical in our brain, the same chemical probably that nicotine and other things and drugs do and everything. And I think one day, we will look back on this, if it's not too late, and say, wow, what did we allow to happen?
The work that you've been doing around this, just in having a voice around that space, is really good, because I think a lot of musicians who are perhaps earlier in their game than you and I are, they've got no choice but to give into it and go along with it.
This is a really good point, and it's the thing I get asked all the time when I go to colleges, because I tell people, maintain your own marketplace so that you can sell your music yourself directly. And what they all say is, but that's impossible now. You started before YouTube began, and you started building your audience through ArtistShare in 2003. YouTube, I forget if it's 2005, I think, or something. It started, and now this idea that you have to put your music on these big platforms, otherwise you don't exist, is a real quagmire for young musicians. And yeah, it's when I scream my bloody head off about this stuff, it's largely for them. I worry about them, and they don't remember how things were in the old days,
There's an actor, Martin Freeman. He's a very big British actor. He's very short, actually, but he's very big. And he talks about learning about the music tastes by going into a record shop.
Oh, yes.
And isn't that something that, I used to take that for granted, that I used to go into London on the train for rehearsals and gigs and things. And I used to always go into the record stores that were around King's Cross especially, and just hang out and listen to what was being played, and looking at what people were choosing, and new stuff and old stuff, and I think they're missing out on that, aren't they, the younger generation?
Of course. And so a huge influence on me musically was a guy, his name's Tom Cohn, and actually he became a participant on this project. But already back in 1984, so this is a long time ago, there was a little shop, thank God it still exists, in Rochester, New York, where I went to grad school, and it was called the Bop Shop. And I would go in there, and he had really wonderful taste, and he liked really things that were off the beaten path, And so he really stretched me. He'd say, oh, you like this Gil Evans, check out this Bob Moses album. I think you're really going to like it. It's like, and he would really stretch my mind beyond things, and now we have curation, which is,
yes,
based on what, a lot of times it's based on, corporate interests and relationships and this and that, and and it's mind manipulation, and it's also giving you what the algorithm thinks that you would like based on the other things you heard. Well, what about somebody having the ingenuity of something completely unexpected that they think you might like, in contrast, or just because of a conversation? And so you're absolutely right. Those were days, and I think as a result, what we are going to start to have, which is really sad, is creative music. I think music is going to become less and less creative. I mean, Daniel Ek just came out, the head of Spotify, CEO, saying that, musicians basically, quit your complaining. You just need to make more music, more often, record more often. You can't record every 2, 3, 4 years and expect to make money. And that's absolutely absurd. It's this record I made took years of thought, of planning, of rehearsing, of just forget it, not to mention the hundreds of thousands of dollars, so it's really a crazy time.
It really is, isn't it? And I think people like you just standing up and being counted, both verbally and musically, I think is really important, which is why I was delighted that I could interview you. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Can you give us a bit of background about how you got to where you are now? Perhaps the potted version, but when did your musical career start?
Well, first of all, I'm from a very small farm town in southwest Minnesota. And luckily there was a woman there that taught piano lessons who had been a really good stride pianist. And the only reason she lived in this place, she had lived in Chicago, was because her son and husband both died in 1 month. And her only living family was a daughter that had married a man that was in this town, Windham. So I got this extraordinary teacher that a child in a town like that normally probably wouldn't get, kind of a world-class musician. And she taught me, she had an equal love of stride and of classical music. And I would say that was the biggest influence, because if you listen to my music, you hear in it classical, you hear the blurred lines, and I don't try to merge the two. I just feel that music is music. Yeah. And so my music, as a result, I think is difficult to categorize. I worked with Gil Evans. Yeah. So, and I studied with Bob Brookmeyer, and those people were forward-reaching people too. So that would be kind of the quick version.
Well, yes, absolutely. Anyway, I shall have to try and edit out the dog barking in the middle.
Oh, don't worry, you can leave it in for all I care.
Yeah, well, exactly. And I think actually one of the things that I love about doing a podcast like this is that I think it makes you a real person. If your dog barked, it wouldn't bother me, and I don't think it would bother the audience. It just makes you, you're just a real person.
I actually think they like it. I think that things, are becoming more real in some ways with all of this.
Yes, I agree. Anyway, you alluded to Gil Evans. So tell me how that came about. I mean, that's musical, that's jazz history, isn't it? I mean, that's legendary. So how did you get to work with him?
It was totally by luck. First of all, Gil, I had dreamed of working with Gil. I loved his music. I even had, when I was in college, had called him to see if I could study with him. And when I got the answering machine, the voice said, "If you wish to speak to Gil or Miles, speak after the beep." And I hung up because I thought it was Miles Davis. It turned out it was Miles, his son. So anyway, that completely flipped me out. But then when I moved to New York, I worked at a music copying house, back when everybody wrote everything out in pen and ink, monks. I did that for several years, sitting in an office with other people, copying the music, the parts for other arrangers, people like Don Sebesky and various Broadway shows and things. And I made a good living at it. And I did a lot of the running of the Xerox machine. And one day at the Xerox machine, there was a composer there, and we got talking, and I was going on my lunch break, so we had lunch together. And he asked who my favorite writer was, and I said Gil Evans. And we exchanged numbers because decided we were going to go to this Penderecki concert together. And he called me that night, and he said, "I didn't tell you today, but Gil is my closest friend, and I told him about you, and he needs somebody to do work for him, and he'd like to meet you." And that was it. So it was a freakish thing.
Wow. And so
Yeah.
those two, I mean, that first job that you talked about, in New York, that must have been a real education in terms of literally seeing the nitty-gritty of band parts and what works and how
Yeah,
things.
it did, and it helped me in when I now write out my parts for musicians. It's very important for me that what the musicians see is clear and logical.
Right.
I learned a lot of tricks, and now when I teach places, I really get on the kids about how their music looks, because it's part of it. The musicians have to see something that looks like logical music on the page, and it's an important part of successful performance.
Definitely. Do you handwrite parts, or do you do them on
I
uh
handwrite all my scores, and then I give it to a copyist to put in the computer. So yeah,
right.
I used to handwrite all my parts. Now I have them in computer because it's much easier to edit them downstream. But I miss the look of the handwritten parts.
Yeah, but I've done a lot of big band playing and
Oh, good.
as a sax player, and I still find something about recognizing a handwriting.
Hmm.
You either know what publishing house it was, or something. There's a sense of where that came from.
Oh yeah, I can look at old parts and know exactly who in my different copy office copied them. Still, this is 30 some years later, I would recognize everybody's handwriting.
Yeah.
And I had a good hand. It looked good, and I did music copying for Bob Brookmeyer, and for Gil Evans, and
Oh,
a lot of people, and I learned a lot by copying both of their music. Bob, I
yeah.
learned a lot by copying his music too.
Right. Okay. Well, we're going to run out of time, so let's talk about data lords and
Okay.
what. How did that concept come about? Because I know that some of the tracks were commissioned by different people for different organizations. How did it? How did we get
So
to where we are?
so when I do commissions, I never take a commission where somebody tells me what to write, because
I bet.
I'm just not that kind of a writer anyway. I don't even do that to myself. I never say to myself, "Oh, well, I did one song on this record. I did it," and I'll explain that. But I never say I'm going to I want to write a piece about this garden. No, never happens. I mean, I might enjoy the garden and wonder if someday music will come out of it. But if I sit down and say, I want to try to write something about it, I just don't think it would come out very well. And the way I work is that I just sit and I start looking for sound. And that sound conjures up more often than not. If I find a sound I like and I say, ooh, I like the personality of this thing, like, maybe the beginning of Don't Be Evil, that I remember I came up with that boom, dum, dee, dum. It was just kind of this lumbering thing. And I came up with that melody, and I was like, God, this sounds nasty. It sounds sarcastic. It sounds, oh,
Oh
this is
yeah.
going to be for Google, so it's like,
Yeah.
so it's like the music tells me what it's going to be. And I think, because it's just like, you could analyze somebody's dreams or a child's drawings and start to get an insight into their family or into their life or into their psychology. My music reveals a lot about my life, and my life has largely been about this advocacy. I do believe that this whole issue of big data and the manipulation of people through these companies by other people or by the companies themselves is the biggest issue facing our democracies. And you're from the UK,
Oh yeah.
pro-Brexit or not pro-Brexit, we know that, there's a force there. And in the United States, whether you're pro-Trump or not pro-Trump, we know that Cambridge Analytica had a big play. Facebook had a big play in everything. And do we want our democracies to be affected by this stuff? And so, these were issues that plagued my life as a musician and the whole industry. And so I was angry about it then. And I've only seen the whole cloud. It's like this little stink cloud, that was over the music industry by big data. And now it's just become huge and it's going over the whole world, and I just want to say, wake up, everybody. I mean, this is like, sometimes people say, what keeps you awake at night? Oh, I can tell you what keeps me awake at night, So it came out in the music. But then at the same time, if you can see where I'm from, you see the green in the background.
I can.
And stuff.
It looks
and
amazing.
I'm from the countryside in Minnesota. And oh my God, I love going. I in this other room here, I have a little microscope. I have a bird scope, telescope. I love the natural stuff of life, the big questions that you get when you look up at the stars or whatever. And so those things also come up in my music. And so what happened is I started writing all this music and it was just so polarized. It was like, and somebody asked me one night at a gig, when are you going to record? And I said, I don't know if I want to even record again. And I said, the music is so polarized and I don't even know, what is this? It's just a bunch of music sounding really different. And he said, well, why don't you make 2 records? So then that got me asking the question, what is this music? And then I realized, oh, this music really is about the same thing. It's the flip side of the same coin. It's the reaction against being constantly manipulated and having your mind siphoned by the computer and the phone. It's like taking, it's like a cord going from your brain to your phone and just sucking the living plasma out of it, and then there's that fight to just put it away, and get away from it and then go out into the world. And so that other music reflected that. And I said, this is probably, without trying, of all my albums, the most conceptual. But I didn't come up with the concept at the start. I completed it. The first side, I ended up writing CQ, and Sputnik after I'd come up with the idea. And on the second side, I think, I don't think I knew I was recording yet with Stone Song. Maybe I did. Maybe Stone Song, but definitely Look Up. That was intentional, that I knew I wanted to write something beautiful for Marshall. And then when I was writing it, I thought, what is this? And I thought, this is Looking Up. This is looking at the world and the expansive, beautiful place that we live. So anyway, so that's how it came.
Yeah. And I think Look Up for me is the track which it's almost that bit in the middle that says stop all this stuff about the technology and that the data lord stuff, and look away from it, look up, look at what's around you,
look at each other,
yes,
even that, sometimes I walk around the street, well, in New York now it's so depressing, forget that, but before the pandemic, you just constantly, I'd be walking around, everybody looking at their phone and just, nobody looking at each other. And there's so much to be gained by throwing somebody a smile or something, it's,
yeah. And I think that, for a start, I think Look Up is the most beautiful I genuinely think it's the most beautiful piece of music. It stopped me in my tracks. It really did.
You.
When I was listening, one of my previous interviewees, I talked to about the shuffle and how I never, ever use it. If I'm going to listen to an album, I listen at the start of the beginning and I work my way through. And that's exactly what I did. And Look Up, I liked everything. I liked it all. I loved it all. But Look Up really did make me look up.
Yeah.
And it really did. It's a beautiful piece.
How about that trombone playing by Marshall Jolts?
He's amazing, isn't he?
Yeah, I have him going all the way up to a high A. Nobody plays up there.
Yeah,
I gave it to him. I said, "Can you play this?" And he's like, oh, I'd like to try. I said, are you sure? And
Because it almost sounds like a flugelhorn when it's up
yes.
there.
Well, what was so funny is after he plays that whole melody on trombones, then the flugels have to play it in the same octave. And we were playing it, at a gig or something, and rehearsing, and it was unison flugel playing it in the same octave as the trombone, and somebody kept missing the high A, a B on the flugel. And one of the people said, oh my God, if Marshall can play this on a trombone and we can't play it on a flugel, something's wrong. It was pretty funny.
Oh, that's brilliant. That's fantastic. So what plans have you got for the future? Are you planning to, because this would be a big thing to tour?
Let's see. For the future is right now, I'm kind of just looking ahead. I still have a lot of music to edit for this project. I have a lot of interviews to conduct. Some of the music is still handwritten. Don't notice my handwriting, my pencil writing I'm holding up to you. But I still have lots of work to do for this project, and interviews and things. Whenever I do a record, there's always a few months that are just really busy. And then, I don't know, I'll just see what's next. I was supposed to do a big commission for the New York Philharmonic, but now with COVID, I don't even know if that's happening. And I might like just to start writing and just see what comes. And I don't know, I need a little bit of a rest. I've been working really hard on this record. So I'd like to just take a little time to, I'm a little exhausted.
Yeah, I bet. And I've listened to it sort of 2 or 3 times, and I need to go back again. And I don't know about you, but I find that I listen to music in different ways at different times. So sometimes when I'm going to review something or I'm going to interview somebody, I listen to it in a very different way to when I've just got it on. Yes. And then I'm carrying on with my life. And you just hear different things.
Well, I think this is music, and part of the reason I made this really beautiful package. I mean, people, if they buy the download, they can get it through my site. And if they get the download, they can log in and get the book and everything. And I wrote really extensive liner notes. And I think that these liner notes are not throwaway liner notes. I think they are really essential to getting the most out of the music. Even my mastering engineer, Gene Paul, who's Les Paul's son, he said,
really?
Yeah, and he's really wonderful. And when, we were working on the music, and then I started describing what it's about, and he said, oh my God, you have to tell everybody. He felt that I should actually speak in between the tracks on the record. He felt that strongly about it. So, and I think, and when I made the package is really beautiful. I mean, a lot of people have written and just said, oh my God, this is the most beautiful package I've ever seen. And it is really beautiful. But part of the reason I did it is I wanted people to have that old experience that we had listening to LPs, where you would get that record and be so excited about the color and the smell. I remember taking that thing, opening it up and just sniffing the inside of it and reading the liner notes. And so I really want people to take this in as a whole experience. And it's not, if with this music, if you walk around the house and you clean or dust or do something, or you're driving while you're listening to it, I think it would actually be an annoyance. It's really music that you have to sit and listen to. I mean, maybe there's a couple pieces you could listen to as things are going on, but it's thick, intense music. It's an experience in itself, and it doesn't leave a lot of room for multitasking.
Oh yeah.
No. It's not music for multitasking, not at all.
We have overrun my allotted slot. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's great to speak with you.
You
talk
too.
to any of the Ronnie Scott's people. Tell them hi.
I will do. Thank you so much, Maria. Nice
tell them I want
to
come back. Okay.
Yeah. Bye. So that was a real treat, talking to Maria Schneider about her album Data Lords. And I hope that she does manage to come back to Ronnie Scott's fairly soon, although I think it's going to be several months before any Americans are appearing there. So thank you for joining me once again on Harmonious World. Please do review the podcast, let me know what you think, and I look forward to my next interview here on Harmonious World. Thank you for listening to the latest episode of Harmonious World. My name is Hilary Seabrook, and it's a great delight to bring this series of discussions with musicians and composers and writers and all sorts of people to you. Obviously, there's no point in having a podcast if people aren't listening, and I'm very grateful to my listeners for doing so. Thanks also to Joe English for composing and performing this new theme tune. So wherever you get your podcast, you can leave a review. You can share this with your friends and family, either as a link or on social media and that sort of thing. I'd be really grateful for that. Don't forget that you can subscribe now. There's a link wherever you get your podcasts. So have a great week, and please remember why I started this, which is just to try and make the world a little more harmonious. Thanks for listening to Harmonious World.